Hello everybody, welcome to the stream. I know it's been a while. Hope you're having a good Saturday, a nice relaxed Saturday. I'm good. I'm relatively relaxed. My back's all fucked, but it's my own fault. I went and got a new tattoo on Wednesday, which is like on the shoulder, which means I can't lie on that at night. So I'm kind of lying weirdly, and I just did my back in tonight. I mean, what you get to do? What can you do? It's happens. Anyway, I'm gonna record a Private Citizen episode. Actually, I'm on schedule for once. I have I have a what? I can't type. I have a schedule at the moment that I'm gonna try to keep. I'm gonna try to start building a Blue Brick thing on Monday. And then next Wednesday another podcast recording. Everything goes according to plan. Today I'm on time for once, so that's good. Right, so the plan is I'm gonna record the podcast. Then I'm gonna finish the podcast, master it and upload it. I'm probably gonna do that on stream because if my back isn't too bad and I'm still want to keep going, I might play some games afterwards. Probably a bit of Tarkov, which I haven't played in ages either. So we might do that to relax afterwards. But no promises. If I start feeling bad or something, I'm just gonna not do that. But speaking of the podcast, let's start doing that. And of course, while I record the normal podcast recording, ground rules apply. You'll know this if you've been here before. I really need some WD-40 for this. This is not also. There's too much shit everywhere. Everything's going to shit. Right. Hello. 1, 2, 3. Let's test everything. That looks good. Does this work? That looks good. Everything looks good from here. Let's test everything. Kind of sounds good. Kind of sounds good as well. Right. So let's record the show then. Today I'm going to talk a little bit. It's going to be a philosophical one. So get yourself a drink if you can. I'm a dry January. I'm having tea. So that's that. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between. Why is this camera? Wait. What camera is that? It's a bit like crooked, isn't it? I think that slid down. Something. Well, it's supposed to show the desk, so that's better. That looks much better, I think. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, law versus justice, which is going to be interesting, I think. And it's was kind of prompted by the previous episode, the triage thing. Let's get into that. I'm getting rusty. I haven't. It's been over a week since the last podcast. I'm all over the place. Let's see if I can get this done. Okay, that looks good. Here we go. You're listening to The Private Citizen, defending your right to have something to hide. This is episode 105 for Saturday, the 15th of January 2022. Law versus justice. Hey everybody, my name is Fab. Welcome to the show. Come to you live from Düsseldorf on a Saturday this time. I'm streaming this live on Twitch as I usually do. And on the Saturday I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is. But I kind of pre-announced it, so it might not be a surprise to you. Nice to have you on the show. Today we're going to talk about law and justice and what the difference is. This is going to be a philosophical one, so get yourself a drink. I'm doing dry January, so I'm having Earl Grey. It's got to suffice. This is going to be a bit more out there than the usual episodes, probably, but I think it's an interesting topic and something I just want to talk about also as a basis for future discussions, because I feel sometimes you discuss these things like with previous episodes. I had this feeling with some feedback I got about the Drachenlord episode, and also not so much feedback, but I was kind of like, I got the idea for this episode in the previous episode when I talked about the new German triage law, right? I think it's an important topic. As usual, go to privatecitizen.press for the show notes, where you'll find links to everything I'm going to talk about. I got some kind of like papers, like legal paper, like not legal, but like legal, scientific, scholarly papers that I'm gonna read from. I'm gonna link all of those. They're all linked in the show notes. Obviously there's also contact details. If you disagree or you agree or you want to tell me something, please get in contact. I value that very much. I say that a lot. But anyway, before we get into the topic at hand, let's quickly, I wanted to mention quickly that I'm going to take February off from work, and which means also from this podcast, because I really need WD-40 for this microphone arm. So I consider this podcast work, of course, because, it's kind of what it is. I like doing it, but, I like doing my work. And I'm going to take February off to finish my novel, which if you want to read the first 2 chapters there at grimdeep.com. And so don't expect any episodes during February, but as usually, I will make up for them. As you're seeing here today, if I don't make a Wednesday schedule, which I'm really aiming for, if I can't make that, I'm gonna, bring you an episode a little bit later, and that will be just the same for that month. I don't think I can pre-produce any episodes. I really don't have the time in January, but you'll get your content. You should know that by now. Just ahead, heads up warning, fair warning, so that you're not like, oh no, the podcast is dead once February comes along. And with that, let's talk about the topic we're actually here to talk about. So why do I want to talk about this? I think the difference between law and justice is much misunderstood in our society, even among relatively intelligent and studied people. And I think sometimes even for legal professionals. I don't probably not judges so much, but I think sometimes I get this feeling with lawyers, and also the police, which is some degree also has just law enforcement. So, and I think it's a case of when you're too close to a subject, we kind of call this Betriebsblindheit in German. When you're at work and you're dealing with the same topic day after day, you become very involved in the intricacies, but of whatever you're doing. But you can sometimes lose sight of the bigger picture, or just because you're always doing something. You keep doing it and you never re-question that. Somebody just taught you how to do something and you do it because everybody does it like that in your company or whatever. And you never ask like the bigger questions anymore. And I think to some degree this is the same. Like, lawyers will sometimes I think equate the law as in, what's on the books in a given country. And obviously, I'm going to go into this a little bit. I'm going to talk about this a lot from a German perspective, but, just because I'm going to quote some stuff from American scholars here later, but like a German perspective as in like our legal system, which is substantially different. The German-French kind of model, the Roman-inspired model is substantially different from the English model, which the American model is also based on. Which is, but I'm gonna get into that a lot more later. But that's more based on precedents. Whereas in Germany, it's much more about what's actually on the books, and there's not so much of an what previous courts said is important, but generally it's more the commentary. It's not like the actual decisions. Like they're not like if a court has a similar case, they're not bound by decisions that other courts have made previously. That's a little bit different. But like what I was trying to say there is that lawyers often, or especially the police, tends to see what laws are on the book and what they how they govern our lives as justice. And there can be a substantial difference there sometimes. I mean, you can very well have laws that in a specific case actually will precipitate injustice, and and the other way around, something that might in a specific case be considered, but a majority of people justice, might actually be against the law. So there's a substantial difference here, and I think people when we're talking about topics, as we do on this podcast a lot, because it's talk about politics a lot. I feel like sometimes I'm trying to always differentiate these things, but sometimes I slip up. I think sometimes people misunderstand something. When I'm talking about laws, when they listen to the show, and I sometimes get this from comments and discussions I've had, mostly discussions I had in email privately, because people didn't want those to be on the show, but they feel like but this is like really unjust, and then I'm going but I wasn't talking about if it's justice or not, right? I was just talking about the legal situation at hand. So that's why I want to talk about this. And as I said, it's going to be somewhat of a philosophical episode. So if I had to state the difference in as concise as I could, then I would say justice is a concept of ethics and morality, and what is considered justice depends very much on the actual individual that we're concerned with, that is talking in most cases. Whereas law is an instrument, somebody who studied, I mean, there are many definitions of this, but as somebody who studied politics and history, I would define it as law as an instrument of the state, right? That is used to hopefully, in most cases, brings what I wouldn't say brings justice to the people, but brings what approaches justice to the majority of the people, right? So, and I think that's always the goal of a law. Is sometimes a law can be considered unjust by often also a minority of people, or a person in a specific case, but that's not what they like. Laws in a state are not designed to be just in every case. They're designed to be just in the majority of cases. And as we will hear later in one of these scholarly opinions that I'm going to read from, in modern states, it's law is often concerned with a certain kind of equality, right? In our modern democratic states, a model for laws that we aspire to is that, usually it's called fair, although that's also up to it. It's also depends on how you define fair, right? That can also be very personal. Something can be considered fair on a societal level, and then some person might not consider it fair, right? But generally, laws are designed so that in our modern states, most democracies, or in all of them, I think laws are, the goal is that everybody's equal before the law, which in practice is never the case, right? Because by the virtue of how the legal system works, for example, in our modern societies that are capitalist societies, if you have money, you generally are not equal to somebody who doesn't really have money, right? For example, in Germany, if you if you're in front of if you're defended in a criminal case, right? You always you get the state. If you don't have money to hire your own lawyer, you get a state. I think it's the same in the US. You get in the UK, you get a state appointed attorney, and but they, by the virtue of the fact that they have a lot to do and they're not actually as paid as well as their other colleagues mostly, they often will not be as good as if you just get if you got money and you can afford a state-of-the-art lawyer, you probably have better chances. Then there's also factors like just societal standing, sometimes just the way you look. I talked about in the Drachenlord case how when he had his trial, how he just turned up like in this really ratty, shitty T-shirt and basically looked like shit in front of the court. And I mean that can be a strategy in some cases, but generally, if you go to court and you dress up like a respectable citizen in a suit or whatever, then often you got better chances than if you just look like some bum they dragged in off the street, which contradicts this equality ideal. But that's because states are made out of humans, right? Courts are made out of humans. Everybody's human, and humans have psychology and emotions, and those get mixed up with everything. So if you try to find common ground between law and justice, or that's the goal pretty much of every state, and many scholars have tried to do that, and it's like really hard. So the question you essentially want to answer, if you look at how should a legal system work in a democracy to be fair and balanced, whatever, you want to basically make the law just enough, just enough, not just enough, but just as in justice, just enough to equate to justice. Like, you want your laws of the state to enact justice all of the time, which I think is an ideal and you can't get to. And I've read an interesting, so this was a book review on the Medium by, I don't know, some kind of think tank, I don't know. But I don't really care about the source so much because it was written really well. And it makes a lot of sense. So the book they're reviewing is called The End of Law: How Law's Claims Relate to Law's Aims. So, nice book title, by the way. That's a book by wait, I'm gonna have to look that up. David McIlroy. It's about it's a legal book. It's written by David McIlroy, as barrister and visiting professor at CCLS Queen Mary University in London. But it is concerned with a little bit like, religion as well, because it's like in the Western society, like religious figures in the Middle Ages had an impact on laws, right? And this is like deals with Augustinus, Augustinius, we call him, Saint Augustine, and also I think Thomas Aquinas, who had a lot of they were theological scholars, but they talked a lot about earthly laws and basically justice. In their view, justice comes from God. If you're a religious person, which I'm not, it's often it's the term divine justice, which I don't subscribe in. But the goal is kind of the same. Doesn't matter if you just want to be scientifically have good laws in a good state, or if you ascribe it to God. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, this seems to be a really good book. So in the review, they describe the goal that McIlroy has with this book as follows. So I'm going to read a little bit from this review. If you were asked to complete without hesitation the phrase law and, probably the first thing that would come to mind is order. Law and order trips off the tongue so easily because it is standard fare in political debate, frequently invoked as a central purpose of government, and not only by those on the political right. And rightly so. Without a law-governed framework of public order, society would risk descending into chaos and violence. This is something I subscribe to very much. This is the Thomas Hobbes kind of worldview. Law-governed order establishes clear behavioral norms and expectations, and so makes social life predictable and thus more or less manageable for citizens, institutions, and governments. But as soon as we probe what law and order actually means, we quickly realize it doesn't tell us anything like enough about what governments ought to do. After all, many repugnant laws are imposed by governments in order to create order in society. And this is something I talked about on the show very much. There's always, the worst surveillance laws and, violations of privacy by the state. They will always get justified with order. So this review continues. Order itself can never be an adequate statement of the purpose of law. McIlroy's core argument is that justice is the end of law, the ultimate purpose of law. And that's kind of what I said in the beginning. I think this as well. I think, in a perfect world, our laws would facilitate justice in every case. I don't think that is possible because, life is very nuanced and people have very different views and there's emotions concerned. And so having a text, basically, the law is literally, sentences, is language. So having like a guide that's written in human language, like a logical language that encompasses any situation you could ever have is basically impossible. Law will never equate to justice. But it's kind of the goal, to get there as often as you can. So I kind of liked that review because of that. And then I found something, a text by Anthony D'Amato, or Anthony D'Amato, probably he's from the US. He's a law scholar at Northwestern University School of Law. And in 2011, he wrote a paper called On the Connection Between Law and Justice. And this is a bit more down to earth than, godly and, philosophical debate. But I think this, he, in the beginning of his paper, he explains the problem very well. So Anthony D'Amato says, legal and political, so I've got all of this on Private Citizen Press, by the way, if you want to read into it, if you're listening to the podcast right now and you want to read up a little later, or you maybe want to read the whole paper. Legal and political theorists since the time of Plato ever since we can think basically, or we have written down things, have wrestled with the problem of whether justice is part of law or is simply a moral judgment about law. I would say I would side on the second. Like if I had to choose, I think it's more of a moral judgment. But anyway, nearly every writer on the subject has either concluded that justice is only a judgment about law, or has offered no reason to support a conclusion that justice is somehow part of law. Because I think you'd have to prove that, right? And you could prove that for a case, right? You could say, okay, in this case, with this law, this happened, and the decision by the court was just. But to prove that for all cases is impossible, I think. But D'Amato says, this essay attempts to reason towards such a conclusion, arguing that justice is an inherent component of the law and not separate or distinct from it. And I thought this was a very interesting idea. He later says, the legal system is a system of the application of justice to human conflicts. As I hope, so this is at the end, right? As I hope to have shown, a court cannot simply apply justice without law, because the law, the full panoply of rules, statutes, and precedents, is part of the facts of the party's situation. No decision can be based on justice if relevant facts are unknown to the decision maker. Since law is part of the facts of any case, the law must be made known to the decision maker, as it is through the services of counsel, so lawyers, and must be taken into account by the decision maker in order to render full justice to the parties. So he basically says, because a judge makes a decision, there's a conflict, right? There's two parties, and the judge has to decide, and the judge, or he or she, wants to render justice. To do that, he or she has to take in all facts of the case. And D'Amato says, because the law is a fact of the case, right? Because in our societies, there's a German proverb that says, Unwissen schützt vor Strafe nicht, which basically means it's no defense to not know what the law was, right? Which is generally legal precedent. I mean, there are sometimes judges are lenient, but generally it's like, to live in a society, you have to know its laws. And so they are part of the case from the beginning. So D'Amato concludes by saying, judges should decide cases according to justice. The law is a fact that is as relevant as any other material fact in the determination of what it is, of what is just under the circumstances. So basically what he says is he divorces, I found this very interesting, he divorces a law as generally people consider law and justice equal, right? And he says, no, justice is the important thing. Law, he basically delegates it to as just a body of rules. He just says, those are just the rules we made for us to live in, for our society, for all of us to live together as well as we can. And a court, the goal of a court is to render justice. And the law is a tool. But, I think in his kind of argument, something like, you would call that, if we just talked about it, you would call it like common sense would be part of that too, right? It would be the law, but also common sense, because the goal is justice. And I think this is very smart. And but also I don't think that most courts don't work that way. Lawyers certainly don't work that way. Lawyers are not concerned with what is just. Especially, if you have a defense lawyer, you might know that your client is guilty. Your goal is to get the best outcome for your client. That's how the system works. And that is neither good nor bad. But good lawyers are not concerned with justice. Same for, state attorneys. I mean, they say that. They say they're concerned with justice, but they're actually not, right? They have a goal. Their goal is they think somebody's guilty, and they want to get them punished, which is that's one of the reasons. One of these days I'm going to make an episode about the very famous, why you should never talk to the police video, because that's another thing people generally don't understand. People think like, if the police job is to render justice. So if I am innocent, I can talk to them, which is a mistake, because the police job is not justice. The police job is to enforce laws, and they could be mistaken about you, but their job is still, if they think you are guilty and they have what they think is proof, or data basically that tells them you are guilty, then their job is to put you in jail or to get you convicted. They might say they do this for justice, but in fact they're not. Like their job is just a process, right? And the same is for lawyers. And I think why D'Amato has a good point. I don't think judges work like that either. I think judges don't see the law. Most judges, I don't think, see the law as just another fact of the case, right? They'd often see the law as the end all be all, which makes sense, because if it's your job, you have to abide by the law, right? That's your if you're a judge, right? Your job is you go to a room and there are two parties and they have a conflict, and you have to decide on behalf of you. Basically, you have to decide on behalf of one of the parties, and you only get two things, right? You get the stuff everybody tells you in the courtroom, and proof or whatever, facts of the case and evidence and stuff like that. But then the only really other tool you get is the law, and you get a book with rules, and you have to decide along those rules. And I think most judges are probably concerned with doing that instead of consciously going, I have to serve justice, right? Because if that was your end goal, and you had two parties, and you have the book, you have the law. If you're concerned with justice, and the law says, okay, I've party A and party B, and the law says party A should win this case, but your sense of justice, which is after all a personal thing, it's always a personal thing, says party B should win this case, then you have to contradict the law, right? Which in something like the American legal system is much more doable than the German one. In the German one, you really can't do that as a judge. I mean, you can pass that decision, but every party in the case has the right to just probably escalate that to the next higher court, and it'll get overruled probably. Because they will say, well, the judge has not decided according to the law. And that's just like how the German legal system works. So maybe I'm colored by that, but over here I feel like most judges generally see it as their mission to see justice done, but what they actually do in fact is follow the law. And so there's another paper I found, which I found even more interesting, and this is probably one of the best, lay person approachable texts I found on this matter. It's a pretty old document. It's called "The Law and Justice," and it was written by C.A. Kent, published in the Michigan Law Review in 1903. But, the law being the law, there's often very old texts that still very much apply, and this kind of philosophy in there, Sometimes we go off the texts that are like 2,000 years old or older. So this paper this is even more practical, but this takes a somewhat more of a historical view, which I liked. So first off, C.A. Kent says, justice means the giving of everyone his due, but in different ages. So that that's something most people would that's the equality idea, right? Everybody getting their due. Also, one has to see that I think this paper is written a bit more from a civil, civil law perspective than a criminal law perspective. Because I think this is generally more a focus of civil law, everybody getting this due. But, you can also bend that towards criminal law, because getting your due means getting due process, a fair trial. Justice means the giving to everyone his due. But in different ages and among different classes in the same age and country, there is much contradiction as to what is due to classes and individuals. And what he basically says here is saying, this is the problem with saying we want everybody treated fairly, because what treating everybody fairly means is very different depending on what society you live in, right? If you lived in Soviet Russia, for example, a state that was predicated on the idea that there are different classes and that the worker class is worth more than every other class, especially a class that only has money, which, it went so far in that, like, their legal system justified, taking money and property away from people who weren't workers, for example, were from a different class, the bourgeoisie, as the communists like to call it, where they just said equality doesn't mean the same thing for everybody, right? If you're a worker, you're somewhat more equal. So that's the problem. C.A. Kent talks about here, and he has a even more egregious example. He says, until recently, slaves were held in some civilized countries to whom very little was thought due. In Europe, there were for ages different legal rights for different classes. And no doubt it has seemed to masters of slaves and to nobles that their legal rights were perfectly just. Right? So this is written in 1903, where this kind of stuff was much closer. Right? Where in 1903 in Germany, there were still nobles who had different rights than just, if you had a font in front of your name, you had different rights than other people. And, it's certainly the same in Britain at that time. And it's important to think back to that, because it's important, because we kind of feel like, in the countries you're probably listening from, we're all like, oh, this is the free world, and we're all Democrats, and we're all progressive minded, and we think kind of often with this worldview comes the naive idea that what we think is justice is the same as law. But what this shows is that what society thinks is very much predicated on society, and we still have that today, right? So, for example, in Germany, we've had since the 80s, we've had rules about, the goal was and is to get more women into higher places in companies, right? And get more women CEOs and stuff like that, for a good reason, because for a very long time, women were underpaid. They were not in these kind of decision-making roles. And so people wanted to change that. So politicians went and made laws that said you have to have a certain quota of women at a certain level of this company, which to the people making these laws was just, right? And I don't actually, today in this episode, I don't want to debate on whether that is justice, because you can very well debate that, because that is a very personal view. I don't want to debate that. My point right now is that is not equality, right? If you say, okay, there's a job opening and a man and a woman are applying, and they're both equally qualified, and the law says you then have to give that job to the woman, that is not equality, for better or for worse. I don't want to discuss today if I think it should be equality, whatever, but that's not equality. That is not, but that could still be seen as fair, because you're saying there are too many men in these positions and we want to change that. So to make it fair on a society basis, we have to kind of prejudice against men in this very specific case, right? But this just points out that it is difficult to say, what's just and what is fair in a certain situation. Depends very much on where you're coming from and what the society is like. going on with this paper from 1903. Today, in this country and other republics, the special quality of justice which meets popular approval is equality. We pride ourselves in saying that before the law, all men of whatever condition are equal. And we generally say that. We say that in Germany as well, even though I just explained to you a law where that's not the case. Right? The words justice and equity have a very vague meaning as applied to most judicial contests. In many, perhaps most cases, they have little real application. Whenever by any stretch they can be thought applicable, both suitors claim their benefit, and the court may find it very hard to decide which has the better right. And you see that in court cases all the time. Both cases think they're justified, and that their view is justice. You had that in the Drachenlord case. He was in court because he, for several reasons, but let's pick one of them. People came to his house and shouted abuse at him. He shouted abuse back. They started attacking the gate of his house, or basically, attacking. Go to his fence and just shake the fence or whatever. And he said that to defend his property, he took out tear gas canister and sprayed some guy in the face, right? And he got indicted for that. But he was kind of saying, me spraying that guy in the face with tear gas was justice, right? For him, that was very much justice. He felt justified in doing that because he said, I was attacked. I'm attacked by these people and they're attacking me. And that is debatable, right? It's debatable if that was justified at the moment. There's certainly moments where you may use tear gas to defend yourself, right? If so, there have been lots of cases where a man tried to rape a woman and she had a tear gas canister and she sprayed him in the face and he got hurt. And then this whole ended up in front of court and he was like, she basically attacked me. That's assault. And the woman said, I was defending myself. He was trying to rape me. And the judge said, no, that is completely justified. So that's kind of like what this guy, Zia Kent, is also talking about. In many cases, the controlling question is what rule will be for the benefit of the public. And I feel like this is very much how we think about this generally today. Right? If you look at it from a political science kind of standpoint, that is the end goal of the law. Right? So you want laws that are of benefit to the public. They might not benefit a certain person. Right? The assault rules or the defending your property rules we have in this country might not in the case of Drachenlord, Rainer Winkler, be justice to him. Like, even if you look at it from a society standpoint, like the majority of society might not think that, in his case, justice was served. But generally, if you're the state and you're trying to make laws, that is not what you're trying to do. You're trying, if you have 80 million people living in Germany and generally these laws work and they protect people, and then you have one guy who's a specific outlier because he likes to shout at people and he likes to do it on the internet, it might be justified to just say, it's not in his benefit, but it's generally in the benefit of the public. And, I've been critical of these kind of utilitarian arguments in the past, but that is very much how it works, like how states make laws, how it generally, I feel, should work, right? I'm not a utilitarian at heart, but I think when it comes to laws and it comes to complex states with millions of people living in them, this is probably the only way. You just have to make sure that they're not too utilitarian, right? And that's generally why I am such a proponent of civil rights, because civil rights usually temper this kind of thing, right? They're usually a dampening factor on these kind of laws. I feel, right, on the utilitarianism of the general, legal system. Anyway, continuing in this paper. And in all cases, the benefit of the public should be considered as much or more than the equity of the suitors, right? So basically, if you have a court case and there are two people and you're deciding who's right and who's wrong, it's still more important that whatever decision you make benefits the public. This is very much from an American standpoint, because if you decide something as a judge, that becomes precedent, and it might, other courts have to kind of often adhere by that. It's not so much in Germany, in our legal tradition, because that doesn't matter. It's more important what the state writes into the books, in the law books, because that's what in the end is what matters. The interest of the public is in the establishment of convenient, plain rules by which they may guide their business. This justice to the public should never be forgotten through eagerness to do justice between the suitors. But if we consider only the rights of the latter, so the public, it is difficult to find any wide rule of equity which is not based on what is customary. So now we're getting philosophical, right? So if you're trying to make laws that are of benefit to the public, this guy says, and I think he's right, the problem is the public always decides on what is customary at the moment. So he continues, our notions of moral right are chiefly based on the customs of the society in which we have been educated, right? Which is why education is very important. This is a very important sentence, and it is very true. Our notions of moral right are chiefly based on the customs of the society in which we have been educated. I believe this very much. I think this is why we need to, teach classical philosophy and thinking like that in schools, because otherwise, and this is also why if we don't teach children, for example, why privacy is important, then it won't be in the future, right? Because as a society later on, they will not think this is even right. It's worth having. Different nations and classes. So you can see this from 1903 because they're talking about classes. Different nations, like even in the US, different nations and classes vary in their moral notions, mainly because in some way they have developed different customs. We find great difficulty in tracing back these various customs to any original principles of morals which will be generally accepted. I think that's also very true. In general, it may be said that the ordinary and clearest ideas of both moral and legal right with most people are based on the rules in which they have been educated. And if customs have no rational basis, the fact that they have been acted on, that rights have grown up in reliance on their validity, constitutes one of the strongest reasons for basing legal decisions on them. If we look into legal history, we shall find that probably much of the strongest motive which has affected the law is the desire to make it so fixed that people can know how to act. So basically, it's to people generally, to society, it's much more important to know what the rules are than if they are just. And I find it interesting that this is an American writing this, because this is a very, very, I feel, German, this is a very Prussian kind of attitude, right? Where you're not so concerned with, is something in the end justice? It's more about, we need clear rules and we need to act by these rules. And Germans are very much like this. And you've seen this in the pandemic as well. It's like arbitrary rules. So I don't even care. Like, I don't even care if this makes sense. And you see this very much right now, because many people in Germany and also people outside of Germany complain that Germany is a problem when it comes to the pandemic rules, because here, and I've talked about this, how every federal state has decision-making powers. Actually, the federal government is trying to take that away, and there's broad public support for this, which I think is really dumb, because, we learned during the Nazi times that this was very bad, and centralized Germany is very bad. So this is why we created these powers for the federal states. But people find it very inconvenient. And they're basically thinking, I don't care if this rule, right? I'll have to wear a mask, and one eye has always been shut, and I have to dye half of my hair red on my head. I don't care. I just don't want it to change, right? I don't care how inconvenient it is to me. Yeah, I'm gonna complain about it. I'm gonna huff and puff, but generally, I just want to clean rules to live my life by, and they don't even have to make sense. I just want them to not change. And what pisses people, this is so amazing. So right now these rules change all the time. So they relax them. Then the Omicron came around, and now everything's bad again. And then now it's worse. And what I find very, very, like, I don't know, amazes me and dismays me is that people are much more resistant to these rules changing a lot than they're actually just like impinging on their freedoms. Like Germans actually don't care so much if you take their freedoms away, as long as the rules stay. And I feel very much that was one of the successes of the Nazis, because they had very strict rules, but they were dependable, and that's what Germans want. And interestingly, this guy argues this is what societies generally want. Right? This is an American arguing this. Okay, it was 1903, but very interesting. So he goes a little bit into history now, which appeals to me. He continues. This is just I've cut this out of the paper. It's a very long essay. Well worth reading. So private citizen press. It's a link to the whole thing. Anyway, he continues. The development of the law appears to have mainly ceased. So this is like the political. This is the historic aspect, right? The development of the law appears to have mainly ceased in Athens. So this is ancient Greece. During the period of its greatest glory, because questions of fact and law were submitted without appeal to the decisions of immense juries, who were expected to decide, and did decide, not according to any fixed rules, but according to their sense of justice or pity or whatever emotion the orators of the day could excite. In Rome, questions of fact and law were separated, and the latter left to decisions of trained lawyers, who were guided not by previous decisions, but by commentaries on the law made by men of the highest eminence for their legal attainments. The result was that Roman law reached a degree of excellence which has made it the admiration of all competent judges and the basis of a large part of the law of Europe and America. Right, and this is the Roman legal system, which we still have in Germany, where judges decide by what laws are on the books, and they don't care about what other judges have decided before them. They care about commentaries by scholars on these laws, right? And if you want to change, you don't have different decisions that by courts that pile up, and then you say, well, the last 10 judges have decided that way, so we're going to decide that way. It's kind of a little bit more how it works in the UK and the US. No, here you would change that law then, right? The government would be required to change, or would be expected to change the law. Anyway, continuing in this text. The development of English and American law has not been unlike that of the Roman law, but there is one important difference. We find our law in our statutes and the decisions of our courts. But at Rome, or Germany, previous decisions were not binding on a judge save in that case. He looked for guidance to the commentaries of the most eminent lawyers. So what he's kind of saying here, the problem is, if we accept that law generally is there to be of the benefit of the public, then we have the problem that it's very much decided by the customs of the day. And we don't want that. We want to transcend that, right? We want laws that are almost like in a way why can't I? There's a word that's on the tip of my tongue that I can't. It just doesn't want to come out. We want them to be. I think I'll have to look it up in German. For some reason I have a German word. What am I trying to say here? Not ubiquitous. universal, right? We kind of want our law to transcend the feelings of the day, and we want them to be universal. And really good laws are, because if you study, become a lawyer, or you just do some research into law, you will always end up looking at like Latin phrases. And this is because in Rome, in ancient Rome, they developed legal ideas that were so universal that they're still, they're still basically the basis of our law today. I just have to look something up. There was something I just found the other day. So there's in German law, there is a rule, which is, I think it's kind of like double jeopardy. It's called double jeopardy in English, but in German law, it's called a non bis in idem, which is Latin, right? And means not twice in the same thing. So that's a legal rule that is the base of pretty much all of our laws, and in most democratic societies, which says you can never be convicted for the same crime twice, which is so important as a basis of law, generally for how law works, that the Romans came up with that, and we're still using that today. It's a very, very, very important kind of thing. There's lots of these, right? So we kind of aspire to the Romans, the ancient Romans, because we kind of want the same thing in our states and in our laws. We want laws that are so well written and so generally applicable, and so just, right, that the external circumstances don't matter, right? The technology we're talking about doesn't matter. It's just like these general ideas. So we kind of want a philosophy that transcends like the needs and impulses of the moment. And then we want to codify that into law, which, as I said in the beginning, is impossible, but we want to get as close to that as possible, right? This guy, C.A. Kent, ends his paper like this, and I thought this was a very, very intelligent sentence. It is in law, as in literature, art, science, or religion, or any other great interest of society. He who would live in human memory must appeal not to the fashion or emotion of his day merely, but to those qualities of human nature which are permanent. The great legal writers of Rome were men of this type. Their works live, and in them lives the Roman law, because founded on principles which today commend themselves to all who are able to understand the subjects, because they were founded on principles which today commend themselves to all who are able to understand the subject. And so this is kind of what we want, and that is kind of this kind of brings me to the end. And to sum it up, we need to understand when we're talking about laws that there's a difference between law and justice. And that law is an instrument of the state or of society to get to justice. But we can never get there. It's kind of when I talk about journalism, right? Your end goal might be to be objective, but you can never get there. But, that nevertheless should still be your goal. But just because we can never get there, we need to see that there's a difference. And that what somebody, and this could be a judge, doesn't matter, what somebody who actually decides these things, what somebody sees as just is dependent on their life, their experiences, their status in society. Also somebody who's in front of a court who's being decided on. So that is one thing. Justice is somewhat arbitrary and depends on the person. But when we are trying to make laws, and we often talk about laws, I often talk about when I talk about laws, I often talk about the ones that I don't feel are very just in some cases. We have to realize that the goal is to be just, the goal of the law is to have a result that is as close to justice as possible for the majority of people. And it has to benefit the majority of the people. Otherwise, it's not a good law. And there are a lot of not so good laws in our society, right? I don't know where you live, but like in Germany, there are a lot of laws that and generally rules in society, but also laws that benefit, let's say, people are rich, or companies because they have lobbies, right? There's often laws that benefit companies much more than they benefit a person, which in itself could be justified, right? If it's better for society as a whole, that can still be good. But often it isn't. Often it's just, better for a small amount of people, and that's always the problem. So when you look at laws and also, legal decisions, you have to look at the law kind of divorced from justice, right? That's an analysis you have to make in every case, right? And that's often where I'm not a lawyer, but, I'm interested in these things. So I often watch YouTube channels by lawyers or listen to podcasts or read stuff that lawyers write about certain decisions. And I often find myself, or sometimes find myself disagreeing with them, because that's what I meant in the beginning, because lawyers often, there's a case and then a judge decides. And if the judge decides according to the law, as the lawyer sees it, then that often ends the discussion for them, right? Because they're lawyers, they're not interested in a philosophical, political discussion often. They're like, well, this was a correct decision by a judge, so basically justice is served, right? They're not having the discussion, was justice actually served? And to me, that is the more interesting discussion, right? And that's why I never want to be a lawyer, because for me that is boring. Because for me, the interesting questions start when the judge has decided, right? The same thing with when I talked about the Constitutional Court in the Triage decisions. It's like, for many people in society, it's like, okay, that's the highest court in the land. It has decided this is now the law, or will be the law, and they're basically going, this is justice now. Which it isn't. Doesn't, not necessarily. And that's where, for me, the interesting questions come. Like, okay, will be the law now, but is this justice served? That's the thing that interests me as a journalist and, as a person. That's. But to discuss that, you have to, understand the difference. And I feel like a lot of journalists, especially when they write articles, they ask lawyers that specialize in this, in a field. So something happens, there's, let's just, I don't know, the Drachenlord cases in the media, and then there's a decision, and a journalist reports on it, and they ask a lawyer who specializes in this kind of thing, and they ask them for their legal opinion, and they kind of sell that as an analysis of justice, if justice was served, right? Because in the end, that's what the reader is interested in. The reader is not so much interested in the law. I mean, sometimes from a, what can't I do or what can I do kind of perspective. But generally, for journalists, the more interesting question is, was this just? But journalists often confuse this, and then they ask a lawyer, and the lawyer talks about, if the law was applied correctly, and says, yes, the law was applied correctly, basically, and the journalist goes, oh, so justice was served. Where that discussion is a much more interesting discussion. But for a journalist, if you're writing news, that's not something you can just ask somebody about, right? As a journalist, you're writing news, you want a blurb, you want somebody to say something, and then you can quote them, and then your article is done. And you can do that with a lawyer, and you can figure out if the law was applied correctly. That is something you can go, yes, so this expert on the subject says yes. Or we ask two, three experts on subjects and they all agree. Whereas was justice served is not something you can have an expert on generally. Right? You'd have to have a philosopher, and even they would probably tell you it's a very personal thing. So that is often not reported well, I feel, even though it's the more interesting this question. And the problem to me with a lot of this reporting and a lot of people talking about this is not that the journalists can't go, well, was justice served or not. They're confusing that, right? They're going, basically, they're not writing in these clear terms as well, but like in their brain, they're confusing this, and they go basically, yes, justice was served. They could just as well go, the law was applied correctly. Here's a quote from a lawyer. But that doesn't mean justice was served. And that is not a question that is easily answerable, right? And for me, this is a problem that I often encounter when I talk about this on the show, because, when you read stuff about, we talked about the Drachenlord case, and you read my colleagues writing about this, they basically pick a side, right? They go, oh, the haters are evil. Or that's the general side everybody has picked. Or they go, Drachenlord is at fault. He's at fault because he keeps yelling at people and insulting them. Whereas if you go like, what is justice in this case? You'd probably end up in the middle. You'd be kind of like this when he talks about like there's two parties in front of the judge, but what is important is what's been decided for the public, right? So if you have a court case, as you had in that case, being the haters, so-called haters, versus Drachenlord, everybody goes like, oh yeah, who's right, the haters or Drachenlord? Where the actual interesting question is actually not that, because they're probably both at fault to some degree. The problem is like how does what is decided there in the end impact the public? That is the important question, and that is very often overlooked because it's hard to answer. Sometimes it's you can't answer it. But I feel as a journalist, like lots of journalists seem to only ask questions they can answer because they feel like the article has failed if I pose a question that can't be answered. Whereas I think lots of questions can't be answered. And you still have to have that discussion because the discussion is the important thing. Anyway, I hope that made sense. If you have any input on this, please do write me. Private Citizen Press, contact link. There's lots of ways to get in contact. Email, whistleblower, contact forms, forums, everything. Let me know. Because I think this is, this is what I think does not be all end all. And I think this is a very important thing that we might come back to. I mean, this is one of the episodes that I'm probably going to link to for years to come on this podcast, because a topic will come up and then I will say, well, here we have a classic conflict between the law and justice, and then I can link to this episode. So I hope very much I did it justice. And with that, I was talking about the feedback. Let's look at the feedback. I mentioned the forum there before. We had very interesting discussions on the forums in the last few weeks. So we have one discussion who started it all? There's a link, Private Citizen Press, show notes for episode 105. There's obviously a link. I think, Barry Williams started this. Basically asking the question, does vaccination actually increase the spread of SARS-CoV-2? And I think I first misunderstood him, but there's a very interesting discussion that came from that. I don't want to read all of that out on the show, but it's well worth reading. And, even if you're not on the forum, you can read it. It's public, right? But if you want to comment, please just sign up. It's not that much hassle. And then there was also a very interesting thread on last episode 104, like the feedback thread. It's also well worth a read. I'm not going to read out all of it, but, Basil Will once again came in with, I was talking about triage and handicapped people, and he was basically linking to a Guardian story where the same thing came up in the UK, I think. And it seems to be that they actually have this problem where there's actually, people who are disabled are being mistreated in triage, even though like their disability doesn't even affect, what you're deciding, like what their chance to survive is. So, that's definitely not something I was defending. And very interesting. And then, obviously, Redeemer F also had some very interesting thoughts on this whole problem. And this is just a very, very good discussion. Yevgeny came in from Russia. And, he's of the opinion that generally this is not such a big problem, because generally you always have that problem that judges are being burdened down with, as he calls it, additional legal, financial, political, moral, whatever overload. I told him I feel that this is not so much in Germany, that this is actually a turning point in how doctors have to deal with things in Germany. I don't know if I'm not clued in enough what's going on actually in emergency rooms, or if it's just a different situation in Russia, which wouldn't surprise me. But anyway, it's a very good discussion. We had some discussion about the military, it's a thread well worth reading. Then I also had an email from Carlos F. Lange, who says, "Thank you for episode 100. It was really nice to hear you speaking from the heart, and boy, did I have goosebumps hearing Pseudo-Mod-Probe again. So many memories." It's nice that people got a kick out of that. Thanks. I'm also happy that people like that episode. And Matt Tesoro said on Twitter, just got done enjoying Private Citizen episode 104. Nice job, but a word of warning. If you ever make it to Texas, when you say triage, it starts tree, not tricycle. So triage, I guess. Triage. As if it has something to do with trees. At least that's how we say it here. I'm going to get into trouble if I get to Texas anyway. I don't think they're gonna. I replied to him. I said I don't think they're gonna like the way I pronounce Azure either. I always like everybody in Germany, because Microsoft Azure, because that's what they call their cloud service. Now everybody in Germany, because they never heard of the color being pronounced, even though we officially learn SBE, so like British English, Southern British English in school. Obviously there's a huge American influence. So if you speak German, English in Germany, from your school education, you should call that color Azure, which I'm trying to do. I'm trying to speak the Queen's English here. That's why I'm trying to say privacy as well. So I'm gonna get into trouble over there anyway. I'm just gonna try wearing my John B. Stetson and hope that'll rescue me. Anyway, thanks for that feedback. Also, Matt, very nice. He was writing to me on Twitter to my personal account, but I thought want to put that in the show notes. If you also have comments, and you should really, if you listen to this 1 hour philosophical one-man show by me, then you probably, you will maybe feel different. If you feel the same, I'll still want to hear from you, actually, really. Please give me some feedback. I always appreciate that. With that, we get to the point where I tell you that you can support the show if you want to. You don't have to. You can become a patron on Patreon, or you can support me via PayPal, producers@fab.industries, or you can subscribe on Twitch if you want to. That's the value for value model. And with that come the thanks to the people who did that. So keeping the show on the air and bringing you this episode today, we'll have to thank Georges, Steve Hose, Butterbeans, Jonathan M. Heathy, Michael Mullen Jensen, Dave, Michael Small, One Eye 11G, Rodane the Insane, Jaroslav Lichtblau, Jackie Plage, Philipp Klostermann, IKN, Vlad, Bennett Piata, Tobias, Sandman 616, Kai Sears, Mode 7, Joe Poser, Fadi Mansour, Dirk Didi, Rizel, Avis, David Potter, Mika, Mr. Amish, Cam, Dave Umrish, Ricky M, Barry Williams, Jonathan, RJ Tracy, Rick Bragg, Captain Eckhead, Robert Forster, Superuser, Astral C, D, No Reply, Ewan Curry, John Chandler, Robin Lieber, Zach, and Felipe Carvalho. Thanks to all of you for supporting the show. And also thanks to my Twitch subscribers. I'm live streaming this on Twitch, and they're either supporting that or the my bad video game playing, where I get killed all the time. So thanks to Stardew Lisa, Mike the Dane, JohnsonMH.com, IndieGamiacs, Redeemer RF, Sandman616, Bacon the Pork, Mode 7's Unavailable, Nomt771, Water News XYZ, and MTE Sorrow. So thanks to all of you. I appreciate it. I wonder if MTE Sorrow is Matt Tesoro. I don't know. Kind of strikes me as that could be possible. A lot of the people support the show, support it in various ways, which is very much appreciated. You're the hardcore producer base that keeps me going. And I also have to thank Bytemark at bytemark.co.uk, UK cloud hosting company, an amazing UK cloud hosting company. For many years, they've provided me with 2 servers that bring you the audio files without fail. For years, this has been working, and I couldn't pay for it. I'd go bankrupt. So thanks to Bytemark. Yep, and also thanks to Raul Cabazali, who wrote the song Acoustic Roots, which is the theme song of this podcast. Why can I never say this? I'm not even drunk. Yeah, and then I'm going to play us out with a song called Here and Now by the Blattwerk band. We had several of their songs on the show. There's an amazing jazz combo, and I've been enjoying jazz a lot recently. So yeah, I'm gonna play you out with that. I should be back next Wednesday. As long as it's still January, I'm trying to keep to the normal schedule, and then of course no shows in February while I try to finish my novel. But there'll be, I think, 2 more shows this month probably. I could look at the calendar right now, but it sounds about right. Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. I was gonna tell you at the beginning of the show why the show was delayed. I mean, I talked about this before, but I totally forgot. So I had a tattoo done last Wednesday, so I couldn't do the podcast on Wednesday. A snake. I should probably put a picture in the show notes. I posted it on Twitter, but I'm gonna put a picture in the show notes for you. It's only the first half of the tattoo. It's a lot more to come. It's very green and blue because fuck the EU. And so I did that on Wednesday, and then the rest of the day, obviously, I was hurt, and the day after as well. And I don't know. I underestimated how because it's on the shoulder, I couldn't move that arm for a while, and like typing even hurt and shit. And then I had a lot of other stuff to do, so yeah, this show just got delayed because of that. But we should be back to a normal schedule next week. Anyway, have a nice weekend if you listen to this on the weekend or whatever. And I'll see you soon. Remember, always aim to misbehave. Alright, got to switch the microphone back on. Where were we? Stop. Save. I'm gonna edit the show now. Because I wanna keep streaming afterwards. I think I'm gonna at least be streaming a few hours. My back's actually took some pain medication. Not because the pain's so bad, but because then it keeps getting worse and worse. Anyway, what was I going to do? I was gonna to find this part and then I also mentioned during the course of the episode is the anyway, should probably go and switch the alerts back on in case somebody subscribes. Boop, 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 boop. Here we go. Yes. Is the legal idea of non bis in idem, non bis in idem. Right. So we've got that linked. We've got the tattoo. Legal concept. Right, we got that. We got that. Everything else is okay for now. for now. Right, let's edit this. So now I haven't done this in a while. So now you will see what the editing looks like, which is very, very streamlined these days. Because this is why this is kind of live to tape. Actually, probably with this I can switch off voice meter now, right? I don't need that anymore. And then we switch to that. All right, 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's see if you can hear what that is. Right, we have less delay on everything, which is good. You're listening to The Private Citizen, defending your right to have something to hide. That doesn't make any sense. Do that. You're listening to The Private Citizen, defending your right to have something to hide. This is episode 105 for Saturday, the 15th of January, 2022. Law versus justice. Hey everybody, my name is Fab. Welcome to the show. Come to you live from Düsseldorf. Let's talk about the topic we're actually here to talk about. Cut this out. You're probably not hearing that anyway, but I'm a perfectionist, so we're actually here to talk about. And chapter, talk about. So why do I want to talk about this? I think. Oh, actually, I can disarm that. Right. So the justice. All good. These weird sounds, we don't need those. Chapter. Let's look at the feedback. I mentioned the forum there before. We had very interesting discussions on the forums in the last few weeks. Oh, no. And with that, we get split. Banana split, net split. Get that. I always appreciate that. And with that, we get to the point where I tell you that you can support the show if you want to. You don't have to. You can become a patron. Because it's on the shoulder, you soon remember, always aim to misbehave. And I was thinking of saying something else there, and I couldn't think of anything. So we have a pregnant pause, which we're going to cut out. And I'll fix it in post. Remember, always aim to misbehave. I think that works. Question is, How is the music compared to this? Underestimated how because it's on the shoulder, I couldn't move that arm for a while, and like typing even hurt and shit, and then I had a lot of other stuff to do, so yeah, this show just got delayed because of that. Isn't that guy? But we should be talented back to a normal fucking schedule, artist next week. Anyway, have a nice weekend if you listen to this on the weekend or whatever. Like about here. And I'll see you soon. Remember, always aim to misbehave. I'm going to have a second session in March. Will we do that? I didn't want to do it in one session. I'm a pussy. That was enough pain for one day. Because I fucking hate needles. Wer schön sein will, muss leiden. That's what we say in Germany. If you want to be beautiful, you have to suffer. Dun, dun. It's a beautiful song. You also want to have a bit of silence at the end there. So that the next podcast somebody has in the queue doesn't start immediately. It's always a good idea. Yeah, and that's pretty much the edit. We then go to chapters, and then we go. As you can see, over like, what is it now, 13, 14 years of podcasting, I've streamlined this quite a bit. And then we go here. Go this episode 105. Law versus justice. I am the law. It's also very poignant that he didn't say I'm the justice. For good reason. Okay. Save that. And then actually export it as in publish it. No, that doesn't matter anyway. Yes, and then while we do that, we can do the kind of the teaser image, right? Let's go to Unsplash, which I like. That's a nice one. What's her name? Justicia? That's even. No, that's Texas. Is her name just? No, that's a plant. I want the fucking what's the Justitia, right? I'm an idiot. Oh, they only have that image. That's a bit, I don't know. That angle is shit. Lady Justice. Yeah. Yeah, no, not her. The seal. Well, I'm going to take that one. Right, download. Yes, Yes. Le Gimp. Unleash the Gimp. Unleash the Gimp. Here's the Gimp. Open. Not the porn folder. Whatever. Don't really give a fuck. Why does this look so shit? Okay. 16 by 9 is what we want. 16 by 9. Alright. Can't see the sword, but okay. Scale. Oh, if you're not listening to the podcast, I might as well have a bit of jazz in the background. 1200, 675. Overwrite. Export. And then we go to Halftone Pro. We upload. Select. Matrix. Check that one. Save. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Don't look at my porn. Cover. Episode 1. For some reason that did kill Hugo. Alright. There we go. Looks good. Okay, so the only thing we need now is the actual time. It's the 15th, is correct. 90. What? 1900 hours. 38. 36. Alright. We got the cover. And now we just need for the episode to finish. To export. Well, I'm gonna have a little break and make myself tea and see what the wife's up to. I'm gonna leave the jazz and I'm gonna go to break screen and see you in like 10 minutes, I guess. Or thereabouts. So see you in a bit. Don't go anywhere. I'm back. I was gonna say, why is my music gone? Sorry, that took a while. I spilled some honey and it got everywhere. Horrible stuff. Hope the jazz is kind of overpowering the neighbors. I don't know if you can actually hear them. They're having some kind of party, I think. Some horrible music. Anyway, so we've exported that. Oh, that reminds me, I wanted to hit up Jonathan, see what he's up to. I think he must be streaming today. Oh yeah, he's streaming something. I think he's playing Divinity with Khalifa. Well, maybe we can get together afterwards. Right. What am I doing here? Oh, I need to export this as well. Flag, right? 105. Okay, I'm gonna go to a quick break screen again while I'll upload some shit, which I need some privacy for. No, I'm just gonna upload the podcast, but I'll be back very, very soon. Sorry for this. I should have really done that in the break before, but I forgot. So I'll be back in a few minutes. Right, I'm back. You probably noticed that my upload went to shit during that anyway for some reason. My internet connection is like borked, and also the neighbors are having like children. I don't know if you can hear that. It's like fucking children disco going on up there. I don't know what the fuck's going on. Anyway, let's finish this. I've exported that. That is done. Oh, I should pause the music here. Let's have a quick check. That's okay. Let's just fix the time here. Coded the correct episode. You're listening to The Private Citizen, defending your right to have something to hide. This is episode 105 for Saturday, the 15th of January 2022. Law versus justice. Luckily, I finished the podcast like early today. Like earlier than what I normally don't record on the weekend, but like the fucking bass thing. Fucking hyper techno party upstairs would have been a bit of a problem in that regard. Okay. Oh. That was too much. I think so the neighbors upstairs, I think they were like a couple, and I think she left because there's not only his name on the fucking post box thing, and he's been acting out. He's been like, he's in a midlife crisis now or something. Or celebrating that his fucking girlfriend left. He's like playing the piano in the middle of the night or whatever. Anyway, I mean, I'm always recording podcasts that's probably loud in the middle of the night, so I'll give him till like 10 o'clock and then I have to go up and say, fuck, I'm trying to play Tarkov here. I'm trying to record a podcast. Sir, you're disturbing the press. Okay, this is not everything. Are we done? It looks good, doesn't it? It looks good on here as well. So yes, I think. That's 105 done. I mean, this is a directional microphone. I don't know if you can actually hear that. Oh, stopped. Alright, so we can stop that. Now just wait for everything to upload and then we are done with that. As well change the stream information while I wait for that. Is this PUBG? When we're playing multiplayer, not multiple sclerosis. Thank you. Please. That would be good. Right. Come on. Also might as well. Chekhov, baby. Come on. Okay. Here we go. We're live. Nice. All right. Well, that's the podcast. And now for the that's the podcast recorded. Now for the other part of the evening.